Welcome back to Anderson Acres. Starting a hobby farm is one of the most rewarding adventures you can take on. But let's be honest, for most of us, money is tight. Okay? Put up your hand if money's not tight these days. Farming, even on a small scale, can seem expensive and overwhelming, and honestly, it's the cost a lot of the times that deters people from even starting. But the truth is, you don't need a bottomless wallet to get started if you're smart and pick your animals and pick your food that you might grow carefully. Okay? So, today I'm going to share some practical, realistic ways to start your own hobby farm without breaking the bank. We'll talk about prioritizing what you really need, how to save money on equipment, and where to find affordable animals and supplies, and which animals to put off until you have a little bit more money in your pocket. So, let's start by defining a hobby farm. Because before we get into the nitty gritty of how to start a hobby farm without going broke, we do need to define what a hobby farm actually is. A hobby farm isn't a large scale operation meant to turn a huge profit, hence the word hobby. Okay? Instead, it's usually a small plot of land, maybe even just a backyard. In a lot of areas, you can start a little hobby farm in the city with a small yard as long as it's not too small. And obviously, following your city's regulations. Okay? You can, on just a couple of acres, you can produce a lot of food. You can grow food, you can raise chickens, you can do a lot of things that will get you started. Okay? And you might even have a little extra food to sell or share. Now, because it's not your main source of income and you're not dependent on selling eggs to make things work because you're a hobby farm, right? Again, we're assuming you're a hobby farm. We're talking about hobby farming. So, because you're not dependent on some other income, you do have some flexibility. That also means you don't need to buy everything all at once. You don't have to be like, well, if I don't get everything right now, I can't turn a profit right now, and then I'm going to go broke. Because the point of the hobby farm is some self sustainability, not 100%. Nobody's 100% self sustainable these days, but a little bit of self sustainability and the enjoyment of having the hobby farm and maybe of knowing where your food came from. So, budget friendly farming starts with setting realistic expectations for what you want out of it. One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to start everything all at once. Okay? They buy the animals and the fencing and the coop and the tractors and the plants all now today. We're going to get started right now. We're going to do it now. Well, that's a recipe for financial burnout. Instead, start really small. Maybe just with a handful of chickens or just a garden in your backyard. Learn as you go and then expand the following year. This approach keeps costs manageable and gives you time to figure out what works for your land, your climate, and your lifestyle. And it also lets you know when to stop. When you notice the money drying up, it's time to stop expanding. If you jump in too fast, too deep, too fast, you're going to find that the money dried up and you didn't notice quite fast enough, and now you're in over your head with animals that need to be fed. Okay? So go slow. Now, if you don't already own land, don't panic. Hobby farms don't always require a large acreage. A lot of people start in their backyard with just a couple of raised garden beds and a small chicken coop. That'll work. If you do want more space, look for marginal land that isn't ideal for large scale farming, but might work perfectly for a few animals or a couple of gardens. Sometimes older farmsteads go up for sale at a really low price because the barns or the houses need work. And I'm assuming if you're starting a hobby farm, you're not afraid of a little hard work because hobby farms are a lot of hard work. So if you're not afraid of hard work, well, sweat equity, your time and your labor can save you a fortune if you're willing to do the repairs yourself. Okay? These days, you might need a professional to do things like plumbing and electric if you're not skilled in that area. But a lot of stuff you can do yourself. You can pop on YouTube and find a bunch of how-to videos. How do you put drywall up? You can watch a video It might take you a little longer than it would take a professional, but you can do it. You got a couple of hands and a couple of good strong backs to help you lift, and there you go. You can do it. Okay? Now, renting land, even just a pasture or a garden plot, can also be a budget friendly way to begin. So don't cross out renting as a potential avenue to get into hobby farming, especially if you're not sure yet or if you're waiting for the perfect place to come up for sale. Okay, it's okay to start in rented land as long as the landlord allows the things you're doing. Make sure you don't break your lease. Don't make sure you don't do any bad things that your landlord doesn't want you to do, because you could end up losing your home pretty quick. So as long as you're following the rental rules. I'm not a fan of renting. That doesn't mean that everyone should buy right away, right? Maybe what you want to buy isn't available right now. That's okay. Now, barns, coops, and fences and sheds and all that stuff can really be major expenses, but they don't have to be. If you're on a budget, get creative with what you already have or what you can get for cheap. So think about pallets. Often you can get them for free or for very low cost. Check out large stores that have things delivered on pallets, and then those pallets basically sit at the back of their store. Find out if they are available for purchase for low cost. Pallets are awesome. You can turn these into fencing, compost bins, even small animal shelters. Old dog houses make great starter coops. Check out your local classifieds, maybe your Facebook marketplace or something like that. Even farm auctions can provide secondhand equipment. You need to make sure you sanitize it first, just in case there's any kind of disease or bacteria on there. But if you can get it at a fraction of the cost of new, why not? As long as it works. You don't need fancy or shiny buildings. That's not fancy, okay? That building is not fancy. It is a glorified shed, a good size shed, but it's not fancy. It doesn't have to be fancy. Your animals care about being safe and dry. They don't really care about how fancy their barn is. Okay? If what you've got is an old shed on your property, retrofit it. Ta-da! You have a barn or a coop or whatever it is you need. You don't have to go out and have a professional barn built if you simply can't afford it. Now, if you want to do that and you have the money to do that, that's okay. But you do not have to be able to afford all the fancy stuff in order to enjoy some backyard chickens and a couple of goats. Okay? You don't need to have endless sources of money. Now, part of being responsible with your money is the animals and how you purchase them and what you buy. Because animals are usually the heart of a hobby farm, but they're also one of the biggest expenses. You want to start with hardy, beginner-friendly animals like chickens or ducks or goats, okay? Look for heritage breeds that are multi-purpose, like that means birds that are designed to both lay you eggs and be processed for meat, so you can process your extra roosters at the end of the season, keep the hens for laying. Breeds that do this are the Sussex or the Orpingtons, and there's a bunch of them. Take a look and see what of those breeds appeal to you and what's available in your area. Dual purpose stretches your dollar a little bit further. No, they don't lay as much as leghorns. No, they don't get as large as the broiler chickens. However, they don't eat as much as the broilers, and they still lay eggs you can consume. And again, you can process your extra roosters. So look into dual purpose breeds, they'll save you a buck. And don't be afraid to buy younger animals rather than full grown animals, or to adopt animals that other hobby farmers can't keep. Just make sure they're healthy before you bring them home. So if they're goats, for example, you want to make sure they're vaccinated or tested, just to make sure they don't bring home a bunch of diseases to your current animals. But you want to make sure the chickens come from a healthy environment. I personally don't buy adult chickens. I buy chicks or hatching eggs. But you could buy juveniles if you are not set up for chicks. Think about what you have and what you can make work, because not everyone has piles of cash sitting at home. So if you can't brood chickens because you don't have a heat plate and a brooder, maybe get ones that are 6 weeks old that don't need the heat, that can be outside in the summer, and then they'll adapt to the weather as it gets colder in the fall. So just think about your options. Look at what's available in your area. And when it comes to choosing animals, if you're on a budget, please don't get horses. And I say that with a mini horse in the background. He's expensive. He's not as expensive as a full-size horse, but he's expensive. He eats a lot of hay. He eats a ration balancer. He needs his feet done every few weeks. And I'll be blunt, he doesn't contribute a whole lot. We think he contributes plenty because he is our sweet little Shadowfax and we love him. But he doesn't produce anything other than a lot of poop that we can compost and use for manure on our gardens once it bakes down. That's about the extent of his actual contribution to the hobby farm. So if you're on a budget and you have to maximize your dollars, so making sure you buy the crops that'll grow in your area so you don't end up with a crop failure and waste all that money, making sure you buy chickens because they lay eggs and can be processed for meat. If your budget is limited, this guy doesn't get you a whole lot, okay? So he's not budget friendly. He's not. And larger horses are even worse on the pocketbook. So my big recommendation is if you're getting started and you're on a budget, don't get a horse. Their housing needs and their fencing needs and their feed needs and their vet care and their hoof care, it adds up. Okay? Now, I'm not saying you should never get a horse. I'm saying wait till you have more finances available because they eat money for breakfast. They just do. That's the way it is. Even like he's healthy. He's a healthy guy and does not require a lot of medical care. He still costs a pretty penny just to feed, right? So bear that in mind before you go get a horse, even a mini. Speaking of feed costs do add up quickly. One way to save money is by growing some of your own feed. So that depends really on what animals you're raising. But for instance, planting extra garden crops, letting your animals forage in that safely, growing patches of grass or clover for grazing. You might want to buy in bulk. That can save you money too, especially if you split the cost with somebody else. Maybe you both raise chickens and you're going to get chicken feed in bulk instead of the 50-pound bags. Then you can split the cost. That'll work. For bedding, look for alternatives that don't cost a ton. Maybe you can do shredded paper. That's what we do. We use all our leftover paper and cardboard and shred it for bedding. Maybe you have leaves. Dry leaves make pretty good bedding, and they compost nicely. Wood chips from local tree services, which are often free. Find out if you have like chip drop or something in your area, and as long as it's not a bunch of cedar, you should be fine, right? Find out what exists in your area that you can utilize that does not cost a ton. We get drops of wood chips all the time. And I collect paper from people that don't want to take it to recycling, and I shred that for bedding. So there's lots of options. Okay, before you go out and spend a ton of money on hemp bedding, look and see what's available for either cheap or free. There are options out there. Veterinary care is important, yes. So make sure you are in contact with a good livestock vet before something bad happens. You do not want to have to pay a vet you don't know because you'll pay more money for basically an emergency. If you keep up to date on their health, have their vaccinations done, have their health check. We do a farm check at least once a year, sometimes twice. We have our vet do a farm check where he checks all the animals. It catches things before they spring up into things that can cost a lot of money. So consider doing something like that. And remember that preventative care, like good clean housing, good nutrition, and really paying attention to your animals will all cut down on expensive emergencies. But form that relationship with the vet first before you have an emergency so you don't end up paying more than you really need to. Now, a hobby farm wouldn't be complete without a garden. And the good news is gardening is often the cheapest part, though often labor intensive. Start with seeds rather than plants, they're cheaper. Save seeds from your harvest from the previous year. Then you can just reuse those seeds. You don't have to buy all new seeds all the time. Buy new seeds as needed. Like sometimes you'll just be like, well, that crop failed. I guess I got to get new seeds next year. That's okay. But save what you can. Compost your kitchen scraps and manure from the animals because that will basically create free fertilizer for your garden. Don't waste the stuff. Okay, it's good stuff. You like that stuff. I promise you like that stuff. You just don't know it yet. Compost your manure. All right, it turns into lovely fertilizer. Raised beds don't need to be made from expensive kits that you buy at the store. You can use scrap wood, logs, cinder blocks, anything you've got really, just to make something that you can fill with dirt. If you're wanting to do raised beds, if you have great soil, you may not need to do raised beds, right? But maybe, sorry, there was an ant. But maybe you want to make sure that you are above the ground because your soil isn't very good. If your soil is not great, you can get topsoil at fairly inexpensive prices and fill planters. Okay, that's okay to do that. Focus on growing your more high value crops, I would say. These for you are not necessarily what they are for me. So for us, some of the highest value crops are potatoes because they're really good, really filling, really satiating. They're a great base for pretty much anything. And tomatoes because we consume a ton of tomato sauce. So we make all our own tomato sauce. So having a whack ton of tomatoes makes a lot of sense. So your high value crops might not be the same. If you hate tomatoes, that's not a high value crop for you. Figure out what you consume a lot of and can you grow it yourself. That'll make a difference. Now, let's talk about tools because it is tempting to want a tractor, a tiller, every farm tool you see in the catalog, and you want to go to a farm auction and buy it all. I know, I've been there. But you don't need them all at once. Hand tools like your shovels and your rakes and your hoes can do most jobs when you're starting out, as long as it's not a huge plot. You can borrow or rent larger equipment until you can afford to buy it when you do need it. Okay? And when you do buy, go for quality secondhand stuff rather than the shiny new stuff. I know we all want the shiny new stuff, but if you can't afford it, you can't afford it, and you can get by with a cheaper, older tractor. You don't need something shiny and new. Farming on a budget is all about patience and resourcefulness and knowing where you really have to draw the line. Okay? Because sometimes you really have to be like, okay, I simply can't afford to spend that. It's okay if you can't afford to spend that. It's okay. Now, one of the best resources you're going to be able to cultivate on a budget is community. I talk about community a lot in a lot of my different videos because neighbors can share tools, they can swap seeds, they can help with projects like barn raisings. Local extension offices often provide free classes or information. Facebook groups and 4-H's and farming co-ops can connect you with people who are willing to trade or give away supplies. Get in touch with your community. Building relationships isn't just good for your wallet, it makes the whole journey more enjoyable. And if you don't know where to start, you have a local farmers market? Head down there. Start talking to people. You'd be surprised who lives near you. Now, remember that starting a hobby farm is not a single year project. It's a lifestyle that evolves over time. When you're working on a budget, you'll need patience. Each season, you'll improve something. You'll add something new, or you'll learn a valuable lesson that you hadn't thought about before. So, over the years, your farm will grow into something you can be proud of, and you don't have to go into debt to do it. The slower pace actually helps you avoid costly mistakes that come with rushing. There are a lot of mistakes to make, and if you can avoid them simply by slowing down a little bit, your animals and your family will thank you for it. That's about it for us here today at Anderson Acres. Drop a comment below and let me know what your biggest money saving tip has been for your own farm or garden, or what you'd like to try if you're just starting out. Thanks for spending this time with me. We'll see you tomorrow.